Do you want to learn how to build this rustic coffee table? Well, stick around and I'll show you how. Hey, what's up? I'm Mike with woodshopmike.com, and today I'm going to show you how to build this round coffee table. Now, this is a pretty simple project, has just a little bit of joinery involved, and then after that we're texturing the surface, throwing on some stain, and finishing. So let's get to the build. To start off this build, I grab a handful of boards that I'm going to be using for the legs of this coffee table. I then figure out where I'm going to make my cuts, and I head over to the miter saw. Since these boards have a fair bit of cup and twist to them, I'm not making my cut all the way through in one pass on the miter saw. And in some instances, I'm even putting some shims on the bed of the miter saw so that way when the board falls through at the end of the cut, it's not binding on the blade. Okay, and here is another tip for you on the table saw. When you're working with cupped lumber, don't do it this way. Put the board on the tabletop this way. That way when you are finished with the cut, the boards fall away from the blade, whereas otherwise the boards could fall into the blade, binding the blade and causing a kickback. Now the next stop in our woodworking journey for this project is the joiner. At this point I'm just going to face joint one side and then I'm going to edge joint one side, so that way I have a good glue seam for the next step. I want to take a moment real quick and say thank you so much to Bessie Tools for sponsoring today's video. Their clamps are the only clamps that I use in my shop. They are super high quality and always give me great results, so that way I'm not fussing with the clamps, I'm only ever fussing with my project at hand. If you are interested in checking out any of the tools that I've used in today's project, including these Bessie Tool clamps, you can check them out, linked in the description below. Okay, so with that first glue up out of the way for laminating the legs, I'm now doing the same process for the tabletop, hitting the miter saw, the table saw, and the joiner, all to get these boards ready to start doing my glue ups. The way I approached the glue ups for this project was to glue up 6 different sections. So there's a top layer and a bottom layer of this tabletop, and I'm gluing those each into 3 different sections. That way the glued up sections are small enough that I can fit them through the planer. So I'm gluing up multiple planks and then running them through the planer to bring them down to their final thickness. With that first lamination for the legs cured, I'm now ready to thickness those sections in the planer. Now I'm heading back over to the workbench and I'm going to laminate 2 layers for the legs together to make 1 leg. As you can see, this is a very chunky table. Okay, and now I'm just repeating that process, but now I'm doing this for the tabletops. So I've run the top and bottom layers through the planer so they're to final thickness, and here I'm laminating those layers once again. When I'm doing big laminations like this, I find it so much faster to pour glue directly out of the bottle. So here I'm working with a gallon of glue, and then I'm using a spreader like you would use for epoxy to spread that glue out so I get a good even coating. Now with the top and bottom layers laminated, it is time for me to get a workout because these pieces are heavy. I'm running these through the joiner so that I get a really straight and square glue surface for when I glue the rest of this tabletop together. For the section that makes up the center of this tabletop, I'm joining one surface and then running the other one through the table saw so that way I get good parallel surfaces. Since the accuracy of this glue up is critical, I used my F-style clamps at the seams to make sure the left, middle, and right sections of this tabletop are all dead flat with one another. With the tabletop out of clamps, it is now time to cut it round, and the method that I'm using is with my shop-made router jig. So I drilled a pilot hole on the underside of the table in the dead center, and now I'm just making a series of passes to work my way down through the entire tabletop. Now unfortunately, the blade for my jigsaw drifted and actually ended up cutting the diameter of the table smaller than what I originally wanted, so I went back again with a circle cutting jig, cut a larger curve, and then I actually used the reciprocating saw to cut through, which actually ended up doing a very, very good job. So once I rough cut away the scrap material, I used my favorite double bearing bit by Rockler to flush trim the profile with the bottom. So with a tabletop round and all trued up, it is now time to cut these legs to their final size. And you've seen this song and dance before. I went over to the joiner, trued up one edge, and then headed back to the table saw to get my other surface parallel. And now at the miter saw, I'm chopping everything to its final length. On the underside of the tabletop, I am now drawing reference lines, so that way I can use those to lay out a router template that will help me cut the mortises that these legs will sit into. I originally planned to just use double-sided tape to hold this template in place, but since the underside of this table already had a hole from the router jig, and this is character grade lumber anyways, I figured another hole to help hold that template in place wasn't going to be that big of a deal. Before I actually start using the router to clean up this mortise, I use a large Forstner bit to drill out the majority of the material. And now with a 3/4 inch top bearing router bit, I am cutting the mortise to the template. As you see, I'm cutting this away in multiple passes, so with that drill bit, I didn't drill to the final depth. And from here, once the sides are cleaned up, I'm going about 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch deep with each consecutive pass. Alright, just to dummy check myself, my first test fit is a bit snug, which is exactly what I wanted. That way I can sand down the sides of the legs to make this fit absolutely perfect. Now the next step that I'm going to do is use my bench chisel to square up those rounded corners, so that way we have a nice crisp corner for the sides of this leg to seat into. So the next step here is for me to refine the fit of the leg where it meets into the mortise. And to do this, I'm using my 5-inch random orbit sander with 100 grit sandpaper, so that way I can remove material quickly, but not so fast that I accidentally compromise the fit. I still want these to be nice and snug, and as you can see, they are. Once I'm satisfied with the fit, I then go ahead and move on to finish sanding the legs. And now what I'm going to do is make the contour of the tabletop transfer over to the legs. So I'm using my woodpecker's gauge to scribe a line along the edge, and then I'm going back with my sander to round over the outside surface of those legs so that way it matches the contour of the tabletop. Okay, so raise your hand if you like it when a table wobbles. Yeah, me either. So what I do to combat that is I always put in these adjustable feet. I just put a threaded insert in the bottom of a counterbore hole that matches the diameter of the foot, and then run the adjustable foot into that threaded insert. After all the sanding is complete up to 120 grit on the sides, bottom, and legs of this table, I hit them with a tool called the Restorer. I use a wire brush and then a nylon wheel to give it a textured effect. With that done, we're ready to start some assembly. And as you see, I'm not putting glue all the way to the front of this mortise, and that's for two reasons. One, I want to leave some space for the wood to naturally expand and contract through the seasons. But two, I don't want to have a lot of glue squeeze out that I have to clean up in that textured surface that I just made. With the assembly complete for this table, I am now going through the same sanding and texturing protocol that I did on the underside and legs. This project was finished with Minwax's ebony stain, and I think it came out great. As you see, I started with the legs first, wiped those down, and then I went on to the larger surface. Now, I did run into trouble when I was staining the top. Since I had a fan blowing across the top, by the time I got finished staining everything else, I had to apply a second coat, so that way I could then go back and wipe off all the excess. That stain had already started to dry, and I wasn't able to fully wipe away all the excess. For the clear coat on this coffee table, I used General Finishes High Performance Top Coat in Flat, and since this is a water-based clear coat, I had to wait 2 days for that oil-based Minwax stain to fully cure. But once it's cured, you're good to spray a top coat that's water-based over it. Okay, y'all, so you gotta tell me, what do you think about all that awesome character in this wood and the color? Came out great, right? Make sure you grab the plans that are linked below for this project. And if you want to see how to build another coffee table, check out the video that's coming up in just a minute in the end cards. Ah, you're still there. Awesome. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, I got another one queued up for you right here. And if you want other awesome content from me, check out those. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit the like and subscribe. And until next time, have fun making something.